and favorite husband.
Where's your non-favorite one?
And my wonderful first daughter, Rochelle, who not only made me a mother for the first time, but also made me a grandmother for the first time.
Someone else too.
We love you dearly, and hip hip hurrah! Cheers! Hurrah! Hip hip hurrah! We would like to draw your attention to the TV that's over here, and I know that you can't all see it at the same time, but there are some greetings for the two of you on the TV.
Who are those cute kids?
And Philip too. She's scheduled to she built me out of my
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Grandpa. Happy birthday to you.
Well done! Oh, my husband. One more.
Same one.
They switched.
Wait a minute.
Oh, cool.
Happy 65th birthday, Rich.
Third.
And 40th birthday, Michelle. Really? 40? You should be there now. You guys really do. For Rich and Elsie, we're looking forward to seeing you guys in a few weeks in March. And Michelle, we can't wait to see you and Stefan and the family here sometime. Sometime. And, you know, it's often sunny, but sometimes it's also snow. That's what we have, as you can see there. So we had a snowstorm last night. No big deal. Hope you guys have an awesome celebration. We love you, and enjoy. Bye.
As those of you who are our friends and relatives know, our children like to pick on one favorite middle sister to give the official speech. So I give you Anna Peeling.
Here.
Yes.
So I'll now read to you from the period. No, wait, that's the wrong one. Yeah, that's the other thing. Now, wouldn't it have been classy for me to point the degree of relativity into the speech? No, that's just thinking too far. Today we're celebrating a combined 105 years of life shared by two people who have an awful lot in common. Much of this has to be genetics. After all, they are father and daughter. But so many of their similarities show in who they are as people that it can't be purely DNA and chromosomes that make these two alike. Let's start with Richard, who was born 65 years ago in Volga, South Dakota. That's right, isn't it? Yeah. To a pastor and his wife, and he grew up in an Iowa farm. I don't remember hearing stories of his childhood while I was growing up, but it can't have been altogether unpleasant because, look at him. Is that the face of someone who is an unhappy child? If you've been watching the slideshow, you'll even be able to see just what that impish grin looked like when he was still the ages his grandchildren are now. What I do remember hearing once or twice is how he wished he'd gotten to spend more time with his father, who was already up there in years when he came along. And because of this, he made a choice to be there for his own children when the time came. This choice alone has shown from him for as long as I can remember, and if stories and pictures are any indication, it started with the birth of his first daughter. Throughout our lives, Dad has always been there for us. I don't know for sure what it was like for the older kids, but around the time I started school, when he was working a graveyard shift, we did have to make certain concessions for him, like not being noisy when he was asleep during the day, but he used his conscious time at home to be useful and to be there for us. I took for granted the fact that dads were the ones who did the cooking, the laundry, the grocery shopping, the driving, and the field trips, because he wanted to. And I always looked forward to Mondays as egg days because he would be awake all day and we'd have eggs together for lunch. He took us places with him, and not because he wanted, not because he had to, but because he wanted to have our company. On Saturdays, we'd go for errands and grocery shopping, and often Sarah and I would wait in the car and prepared with a password to let him in. And that's not something that you see happen today. Going to the library with Dad was a treat, both for the joy of discovering new reading material and for getting to spend time with him doing something we all loved. When he went to play tennis with a friend, we'd tag along and find ways to amuse ourselves. Swimming at the community center must have been a trial in patience for him, especially when we'd want to do something over and over and over and over. But he didn't show it, and one summer while he was on vacation, he surprised us by taking us to a different swimming pool every day for a week. Through all of these shared experiences, he gave us our independence, rather than keeping us glued to his side. Sometimes out of necessity, he did this, like on road trips out to Iowa, when he'd have to send 2 little girls to the bathroom on their own and wait for them to come out.
Pray they would come out.
But most often, this was his way of maintaining his sense of self while he was with us. When we were swimming, he'd have his time doing laps and sitting in the hot tub, and at the library, he'd go off into the vast and mysterious grown-up section while we scoured the kids' books. He trusted that we'd find him if we needed him. From the very beginning, he was a dad who we could go to and talk about anything, from the silly and mundane to important issues, especially later on in life. I respect him greatly for his ability to listen to the attitudes and opinions of others without trying to make them see that his was better or right. And even when he felt that his opinion was, he'd find the words to say so rather than belittle or judge people. This is a wonderful example to us and allowed us all to explore and voice our own viewpoints out loud without the fear that he'd think less of us. Dad was a father and a husband, but he was also himself. We grew up surrounded by creativity in the form of music and books. And it was always thrilling to discover something we didn't know about him, like mounted photographs tucked beside the piano which suddenly looked new when we learned he'd taken them many years ago. Many nights a week, he'd be off to voice lessons, auditions, choir, or just taking his own time in the living room with his music, following along to the score. Tennis was another of his joys, and still is, I believe.
Watch it.
And I cried a little inside when he gave up his collection of vintage wooden rackets and the bookshelf full of VHS tapes of past tournaments he'd recorded off the TV. Big shelf. From the very beginning, he was a dad we could, no, wait. Too sensitive. In Mom, he found someone who complimented his quiet personality, but he isn't simply complacent in their partnership. Looking back, I realize how much we learned from watching the two of them together. That loving someone doesn't mean you always agree with them, but standing up, it's important, but standing up for what you believe is important and compromise is essential. Both Mom and Dad have always had their own interests and have always maintained their individuality while supporting each other. It's only now that we're all grown up that I realize just how difficult this is, but they made it look natural and easy. In the past several years, I've seen this partnership change and grow from afar. Mom and Dad are in love in the best kind of way, the kind that's grown and evolved through better and worse. It's fantastic to watch them spending so much time together on trips far and wide, and at home as well, each bringing their own talents to the planning and the telling of the stories and taking joy from each other. Now all this has, of course, had an impact on this woman standing right here. I've said so much of it already in what I've said about Dad. He's passed on so many of those traits. 40 years ago, a little girl was born to a newly married couple who absolutely adored her. That little girl now shines with the same love of her family and children and the same values as her father's does, which is their largest similarity. By all accounts, the oldest Vermont child was not terribly difficult, but there are quite a few amusing stories that made their way to us, the younger children. Daddy's gone, Daddy's gone, Daddy's gone.
Shit, 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 shit. Notice I didn't say it, she said it. Where did I?
You said it originally.
And there was an incident of cat food winding up in grocery shopping cart because, you know, cats are cute on the can.
We just have a cat.
Exactly, yeah, there was no cat. She just liked the cats from the cans, and so they wound up in the shopping cart. And that's just a couple of the incidents. I can't speak for Sarah and Eric on this one when it comes to what it's like with Rochelle, because we each have our own special relationship with her. And that's much different than the relationships that we have with Dad, I think. Eric is so much closer to her in age, and Sarah is her twin 10 years apart. But this is what I remember of her.
I'm still here, sweetie.
Oh, yes. Okay, this is what I remember growing up with you. Rochelle was like a second mother. She would corral us in the mornings for school, help us with homework, and mediate squabbles before she even reached her teens. She was popular and sophisticated, always at the height of fashion and style through the 80s.
Look at the
Sarah?
pictures now.
The picture that you put there?
The quintessential big sister who could do no wrong, although I'm sure she did. If she did go through an angsty teenage phase, I don't remember seeing or hearing about it, but what did come out during the transition from oldest child to young woman was occasional impatience, because looking after two little sisters so much younger than herself must have been a pain, and I'm sure we got on her nerves far more often than she showed us. She still showed us from time to time. Still, it didn't feel like we were a chore to her most of the time. And it felt so good to be included in her world. To listen to her tapes, to play with her makeup, to hang out with her friends. And she invited us to join in those things. I also see now how many of the values that I've described in Dad she embodied. The inclusion, the passion for her interests, willingness to listen, and responsibility. I was in awe of her, but I could still ask her about girl stuff and be included in a special club. She's the kind of person who can make anyone feel at ease around her and say what she thinks without being condescending. As she matured and became independent, she made sure to include us often. Watching her fall in love with Stefan back in the days of expensive long-distance phone calls and postal mail was exciting because I couldn't remember ever seeing her that way, flustered. We weren't sure what to make of him at first, the serious Dutchman who had Rochelle acting funny, until we caught sight of the cartoon suspenders and socks.
Which he no longer owns.
After that, it was great to watch him bring out her silly side, and to see them together made me think of Mom and Dad, the equal partnership with both common and independent interests. And the way he treated us like his own siblings, felt like he had always been part of the family. Becoming a mother seems to be what Rochelle was born to do, and seeing her do it is amazing. She makes it look as easy as breathing, though I'm sure it's not.
I'm a good actress.
And she embodies so many of the same things that Dad did for us growing up. She's patient and firm, creative, understanding, loving, and silly. And she's still her own person with her own interests as well. She hasn't let motherhood be the only thing in her life, but her children mean the world to her. When Rochelle turned 20, it amazed me. My big sister was all grown up. Now that she's 40, I'm in a bit of disbelief. Has that much time really gone by? Wasn't it just yesterday she was teaching me to shave my legs? It seems to me that she hasn't aged at all since she became an adult, except to get wiser. And many, many years ago, well, when Dad turned 40, it felt very abstract. 40 wasn't a number I could fathom. And I didn't. 65 is like that now, especially when I watch him just being himself. Dad won't ever be an old man to me. You're just Dad.
Thank you, Anna. That last 4 hours was really well spent writing your speech. So now, if anybody else would like to come up and say anything.